Welcome to another episode of Pistons of Fury. In this episode, we are finishing up the fuel system install on the 1966 Dodge Coronet station wagon LS Turbo Swap. Okay. Okay, so this is if you didn't already gather as much, because I didn't say anything about it, this is a bracket for my regulator and filter. So this is the Corvette style regulator, and what I'm going to be doing, as you saw me mocking it up, is basically mounting this right on the other side of my subframe connector. So basically bolts in there to the subframe connector, whoops, right there, subframe connector, and made a little hole for this notch, which keeps this in place or from moving around, and then allows that to bolt in. So the one thing I'm going to have to do once I get this cleaned up and fitted to the car is come in here and weld a captive nut on the top of it so that I'll be able to just screw that in. So yeah, coming together. Okay, so now we finally get to the fun part of the project. I've done a lot of work getting the fuel tank in place and getting the regulator and filter mounted on my frame rail or my subframe connector. So now we actually start to make lines. So this is actually pretty exciting. I've been wanting to use this tool. So again, I recapped it in the last episode, but this is a Ford Rotunda plastic/OEM line making tool. You can buy a similar one from Dorman. I heard the tool is a little more flimsy, so that's not the best. So the way this works is you've basically got this, I don't know what you would call it. It's kind of like a threaded insert that kind of grips onto the hose, and basically insert the hose, and then you use it just like you would a caulk gun, and you basically press one of these ends onto the hose. So what I'm going to do here is I have to make two sets, or two lines, 5/16 and a 3/8, and that goes from my tank all the way to my regulator. So I'll make the first one and then I'll replicate for the second one. I'm going to do 3/8 first, and then we'll come back and do 5/16. Yeah, so just going to get started kind of figuring this out. So the one thing that I do have to do with this kit, as I mentioned before, it comes with these plastic inserts that go in the caulk gun thing here. And they're a little weak because they're so old. So I actually have to use a vice grip to kind of press down, because if I tighten too much on the plastic, it'll crack and break. So a little bit of ingenuity required, but I think overall this is a better tool than the Dorman that you can buy. Yeah, so basically just going to put an end on now on this length of 3/8 inch hose that I have, and then we'll measure from the tank to where we need to be. And then I have these P-clips that I can use to get everything routed nice and neat. Okay, so basically just measured my 3/8 line that I made that was 95 inches exactly. So cut a 5/6 inch tube for the return line, and basically all you have to do with the Ford Rotunda system is just swap out these little cams. So blue in this case is 5/16. There is a red, which I don't know what that is possibly for, maybe brake lines or something. But anyways, so I'm swapping out the silver here that I have in the compressor thing for the blues, and I'm going to make up this 5/16 line, and then we get to install them. Alright, so here's where we are. Here's the regulator. I've got this front line plumbed in, the rear line all the way to the tank, and the return line also plumbed in from the back of the regulator. Again, this is a standard Corvette style regulator. It's a regulator and filter all in one. I had to fab up this little connection piece right there, this metal piece. About a 12-inch section of this double flared quick connect steel line off Amazon, but that was too long, so I actually cut it and welded it and leak proofed it, so it should be good to go. Let's go up above the car and see what's going on up here. So I'm using stock fuel lines on this setup. They're more than adequate for what I'm doing here. And then what we have here is another quick connect fitting right there that plumbs into the stock fuel rail. So it basically just curves along the back, comes here, and I'll install some P-clamps and secure all that. But it feels weird to say it, but the fuel system on this car is now complete aside from the electrical. So again, just to recap, we'll go back here. And there's the in-tank setup. So it's a Walbro 450 3/8" line, quick connect fittings, all Dorman stuff, right off Amazon. It's like OEM, right? It's exactly what the OEMs use. It's what GM uses, and every other car manufacturer between like probably the 90s and 2000 teens until they went to direct injection, had to change that technology. So standard stuff, super cheap. I'll probably do a more complete fuel system episode and tally it all up so you guys know what this costs, but it's like sub 300, probably 250 bucks all in, which is really, really good, because if you start adding up aeromotive fuel pumps and regulators and filters and AN lines and everything, you're getting up there, especially if you buy their kits that are put together. And their drop-in in-tank assemblies, those things are at least, they start at 300 and go up from there. So this is a really low-buck OEM way to do this that's reliable and can really support a lot of horsepower. So hope you guys enjoyed this one. I had fun doing it, and another big milestone checked off the cardboard list. So on to the next thing. Okay, so that's a wrap for this episode. So just to recap, you saw all the components on the car, drop-in fuel tank assembly, Walbro 450 in the tank, OEM style lines using the OEM nylon lines with the push lock or quick disconnect connectors, and the Corvette style regulator assembly. Coupled with that, I used my stock injectors that came with my engine, so just typical LS truck injectors decapped. So they're going to flow roughly 70, 80 pounds per minute or 700, 800 cc's depending on how you do that conversion. So cost breakdown, what does it cost to actually do this? Okay, so the parts cost is basically about $100 shipped to you for the pump. That's the Walbro 450 off eBay. That's a legitimate OEM unit, not a knockoff. In-tank assembly for a Ford F-150, I believe 99 in 2003, that's going to run you $28. Beyond that, you've got the Corvette style regulator. If you buy just the regulator by itself, it's about $60. If you go with the OEM, I think it's a Delphi, Continental, one of the name brands off Rock Auto. And then the final piece is just the lines and the quick disconnect fittings. So you've got about maybe 35 for the lines themselves, about 20 for the fittings if you don't have them from your original setup, and then you've got about 60, like I said, for the regulator. So all in, $250 for a full fuel system in-tank pump from tank all the way up to the engine that can support up to 700-800 horsepower. Pretty good deal. Now, if you want to be real about the cost, I did have to buy the tool to actually create those lines. So if you buy that tool that I have, the Rotunda Ford tool, or if you buy the Dorman tool, that's another $80 that you can plan to spend just to be able to make the lines. In some cases, maybe you can borrow that if you know somebody who has one of those tools. So I didn't include that in my cost. The other thing that I used in this project, or the way that I did this, is well, I'm not going to include the plasma cutter because you can just cut it with a jigsaw like I said in that video, but I did use the rib nuts. That tool was, I think, $60, and then plus the rib nut assortment package, that was probably another 20, I think, so call that $80. So another $160 if you don't have the tools, and if you want to replicate the setup the way that I did it here. Still, it's pretty cheap compared to when you start to think about the Aeromotive and the other drop-in tank options for retrofit muscle cars. Now, if you have a car that has a drop-in setup, you can save the $28. You don't have to buy the drop-in setup. You can probably just use your OEM setup. But in this case, where I didn't have a tank that actually supported that and had to fab everything, $250, 800 horsepower capable setup, good to go. So anyway, hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you liked it, throw me a like. Happy to answer any questions in the comments, so hit me up there. If you're not subscribed to the channel, subscribe, because we are getting close. We're knocking out these big projects one by one. So yeah, thanks a lot, and I will see you guys in the next one.